Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. This is episode 632. We record this every Friday at around 8:30 Pacific Standard Time, AM. And you can watch it live on the WP-Tonic Mastermind Facebook group page. Please join us there, and you can watch not only the podcast part of the show, but the bonus, which we get a little bit even more outrageous. We got some really excellent stories this week, and I've got a great panel. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, and then we're going to go straight into it. Let's start with ladies first. Stephanie, would you like to introduce yourself to the tribe?
Hey guys, I'm Stephanie Hudson with Focus WP. You can find me at focuswp.co or in my Facebook group, Focus on Your Biz.
I've got Uncle Spencer, one of the most interesting and complex individuals I have met for quite a long time. Spencer, would you like to introduce?
That was one of the nicest ways you've referred to me in the last 10 years, John. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Spencer, you are one of the most interesting but complex individuals I've met in a long while.
I have to wake up and look in the mirror every morning, and I ask myself the same question. So I'm Spence from WPLaunchify.com.
That's great. I got my close friend, John Locke. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
John from Lockdown Design and SEO.
Yep, right. I've got Chris, another great friend. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Chris from Lifter LMS, and I have a podcast for course creators called LMS Cast.
I'd like to point out Chris is the co-founder and CEO of Lifter LMS. I've got a new guest to the panel. I've got Vic. Vic, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey folks, I'm Vic from Watchful.net, and we've got a website maintenance Facebook group called Website Watchers. So if you want to jump in there.
And you are also the co-founder and CEO of your company, is that not correct?
Correct, that's right.
Right. Before we go into the main stories of the week, I want to talk about our great sponsor, Castos. Craig was on the interview show last week, which unfortunately I couldn't be part of, but Andrew, my host and supporter of this podcast, did an excellent job. Unfortunately, he can't be part of the panel this week. He's in Spain, sunning himself. But Craig was on the show. But Castos is just a great platform for yourself or for your clients if you're looking to get into podcasting, and you should. It has a one-price structure. You're not penalized for your success. You can get as many downloads, upload as many episodes as your heart content tells you to, and you just have one fixed price. Its interface is a glory to use. The support people try and be supportful. Everything works the way it should, and you'll be blissful that you listened to me and you decided to use it. Go over. Also, if you go over to the WP-Tonic backstroke newsletter and you sign up for our newsletter, on that page, there's a great special offer, and you get 6 months at half price on your Castos package. What more could you ask for? Please show your support for the show. Go over to Castos and buy one of their packages. So, panel, we have weeks where there is not much WordPress news, and then we have weeks where there is a ton of news. This is one of the weeks where there's a ton of news. Let's start off with the buyout of LearnDash by Liquid Web. Let's start with Chris. Chris, you're in this sector. We had a chat about it earlier in the week. You weren't that surprised. But maybe you want to share some of your thoughts with the tribe.
Sure. First, a big congratulations to Justin from the CEO and co-founder of LearnDash, who we founded with Chloe back in 2013. That's like a 9-year journey, which is awesome. And mad respect to Liquid Web. It's a solid hosting company, and Chris Lemma stepping in as general manager, I think is fantastic for the space. Many people don't know that Chris actually has a background in software development in e-learning, and from his earlier days in
Chris has many hidden backgrounds. Chris.
he does. So I'm actually really excited to see him there. I play what I call the infinite game, which means somebody doesn't have to lose for somebody else to win. So having Chris come into the space as now a friendly rival, I think is actually really good for our industry. And our biggest competition, LearnDash and Lifter LMS are, we're competitors within WordPress, but in our space, our biggest competition is actually the hosted solutions like Teachable, Kajabi, Thinkific. That's where the real battle is. And at the end of the day, a rising tide lifts all boats there. But so there's just a couple thoughts there. But really, some of the bigger ideas here are e-learning is not going away. It's not new. Recent pandemic events have kind of accelerated things, but it is continuing to expand. There's also, if you really want to get deep into the acquisition news, there's some great interviews like by Post Status and some other behind the scenes stuff. And some of the things I learned was that
there's going to be some great interviews in the WP-Tonic show, Chris.
this one too. But some interesting notes on the acquisition was that Justin at LearnDash, they did hire an investment banker to help with that. If you're watching this and you have a WordPress company and you're thinking about selling it and you don't have experience selling a company, I thought that was a good move by LearnDash to do that. I also heard in a different interview, while they didn't disclose numbers, it was stated that it was the largest acquisition that Liquid Web has made.
Well, I would have
from a
thought it's
financial
well into seven figures, I would imagine.
Yeah, which is just, I think that's a combination of, e-learning is huge. It's massive. WordPress is massive. I think it was smart that Justin got some professional help to broker the deal. And I just want to say, I think it's really good that Chris is stepping in there. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is good news, and I look forward to having the, just more innovation in the space. I could kind of tell. I was seeing Justin blogging less, and he started a separate newsletter about something else, and I was like, I kind of sensed something was up, but all in all, it's I think it's a good move.
He suddenly wouldn't reply to my emails, and we've always had a very friendly relationship, not as close as my relationship to you, Chris.
Yeah.
But it's always been very friendly, and he's always agreed to come on the show, and suddenly he wouldn't answer my emails, so I knew something was up, because he's not one of the long list of people in the WordPress community that I've totally pissed off. But there we go. I'm just going to quickly put my own spin on this and then move it on to the panel. I think it's excellent news. Based on my own experience, Tribe, the only more stressful thing than building up a business is selling it. If you think building up a business is stressful, try and go through the process of trying to sell it. It's 2 times more stressful. And the second thing is, like Spencer, Chris Lemmer is one of the most fascinating and complex individuals I've ever met, like Spencer. 2 of the most complex individuals I've met. I wouldn't want to play poker with Spencer or Chris Lemmer, really. I found his newsletter post about this was crafted in the level that you expect from Chris Lemmer. It was a superb story. But the reality, this is my take on it, is the reality Liquid Web is a little bit lost. Their confrontation with WP Engine is not going that well. And this, to some extent, is for Liquid Web a little bit of desperation to buy market share. and to find a sector of WordPress which can drive the hosting expansion that Liquid Web needs. Spencer, what's your own thoughts, and would you agree with some of the things I've just stated?
I'll start with I'm not sure why I'm now a complex person, but definitely Chris is a player to be reckoned with in the WordPress community. And I think each of us, all the members here today, have our own little patch of ground in the WordPress ecosystem. And I think that's what makes it unique, is that I remember in the early days when everybody was sitting around a campfire, that there was only a handful of people that were superstars. And it was like really amazing to me how I was able to access those people when I had no history in the WordPress space. It's very rare that you can come into an ecosystem where they say now WordPress is 40-something% of the internet and $1 trillion market. Can you imagine being able to go into like Microsoft's backyard and pick up the phone and start talking to Bill Gates? Well, in WordPress, you can still do that. And the people who are doing the acquisitions and selling their companies are still really accessible. And I feel fortunate for having stumbled into this backwards 15 years ago, because I think that now, in relation to Chris's comments, I liked what he said, because all high tides, what did it say? High tides float all boats. So I couldn't agree more. Did I say that right, Stephanie? Yeah.
Rising tides lift all boats. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that it's true to say, because in my space, I'm constantly having to say to people, there's LearnDash and Lifter. There's Lifter and LearnDash. And so it's like there's Coke and Pepsi and Coke. I think that what's good for LearnDash is good for Lifter. What's good for both of them is good for the ecosystem. One more sale, because we're also probably going to talk about Pippin. All of the original hardcore plugins are being gobbled up because of the consolidation. And if I refer back to why that's good for everybody, it's because, being in that particular space myself, WordPress is uniquely confusing for something that runs half of the internet. Somebody who comes in from the outside world has to really think long and hard or get help to even figure out what's happening here. And by moving everybody into a particular spot, it may be a little less competitive, but it will hopefully be more profitable for those that are players and a little more transparent for people coming in, instead of being confused. And for example, choosing a CRM as your platform of choice, you'll come into WordPress realizing everything you need is here and you own it and control it and so on and so forth. So in relation to your question, Chris is a mover and a shaker. He's well known. He's well known for connecting people. Nexus and Liquid Web, I agree with you, is taking a very obtuse path. But when I spoke to him about why and how, it's clear that it's a poker game. Okay, we don't hear from HostGator or Bluehost or GoDaddy or any of those people why they're buying stuff, but it's clear in Automatic too. It's clear they're doing it because everybody sees the only way that this is going to work out is if you're one of the major pillars of WordPress, where somebody can be acquired as a customer and you offer them everything. And there'll still be some crossover for certain plugins, but I would bet 100% that there will not be the same ecosystem we've been using up till now, where random people just show up and get discovered in the repository. It's going to be like more Major League Baseball. There'll be farm leagues, lots of kids playing. When they get good, they'll get discovered and brought up to the majors to try out their stuff in one of the platforms. And that's going to be
But I still feel that Liquid, that Liquid Web are in a chase with WP Engine to either go public or be bought by GoDaddy.
That's part of the grow or die.
And they know that they know instinctively if WP Engine gets there before them, they're going to have to wait another couple of years before they either get bought out or go to market. And at the present moment, there's just gobs of money out there to buy assets. They're just gobs of money. And they're worried they're going to miss the boat, Spencer.
Yeah, because we'll talk about that Andreessen story maybe in a bit. The problem the world has now, as it applies to WordPress, unbelievable amounts of capital concentrated in a small number of people who have nothing else to invest in. And we have this unusual perfect storm in WordPress where half the internet is running on free software, where all the authors are people that were all sitting around a campfire a couple of years ago. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's literally
I wouldn't use the word
like
ridiculous.
Greenwich Village in 1969 or something. And
I
like,
think it's quite.
what's his name? Bob Dylan? Like, let's talk. I'm
I
David
think it's
Geffen.
quite charming myself. Over to you, Vic. What's your view of this, Vic?
Yeah, I've been following this pretty closely the last few weeks, I'm sure, like all of you. I was struck really by Pippin's comments in his post-status interview, where he talked about the consolidation. I didn't think he really discussed that in such a positive way that you described it, Spencer, as good for the market, or you need to kind of focus the experience so it's not so confusing. His comments seem to be more on the side of, because every major hosting company is creating a different WordPress experience, and that starts with WordPress.com versus WordPress.org, that it might be, less. It might be a negative for the community long term. Short term looks great.
Definitely.
Long term for the user.
I totally disagree.
Bigger challenge.
I totally disagree with Spencer's. He knows this, but he's larger picture. I totally disagree with Spencer's.
I think Vic's point is well taken, though, because we saw that in the Linux market, which is the only other example I can think of where a large open source community got bifurcated, trifurcated into 5 parts. And I agree with you that what happened was, as soon as the money got involved, everybody tried to copyright and put particulars into their code that made it not open source. So there's a real risk of it becoming WordPress flavor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Well,
which makes it less
I'm just
advantageous.
waiting for this, Spencer, because I agree. I want to see if Vic agrees with me. They haven't done it so far, but I feel they're going to do it. And this, unfortunately, Chris, this might be the moment under Chris Lemmer, because they might make the decision that Chris could do this without getting the amount of flack that he would deserve and Liquid Web would deserve. They're going to say, well, if you want to use our library of plugins, you've got to use Liquid Web's hosting. And I think it's coming, Chris. I think they're going to attempt to do that. And by doing that, it's going to be the biggest argument bust up in WordPress history. And that's why they employ Chris, because they think by doing that, they're going to be able to get, when they confront Matt with this, they're going to learn the hard way, the darker side of Matt, because I have had my arguments with Matt about how he runs WordPress. But when he's challenged, and this challenge is coming from Liquid Web, they're going to find a powerful opponent and champion of open source. What do you think of that, Vic?
Well, I can see that coming. I think my experience with the open source community is that when you ask for lock-in, you start to lose users. So I frankly would be a little surprised if they're going to push lock-in. You must use this hosting platform to use these plugins, especially because those things can all be forked by anyone who wants to use them and decides to maintain them a little bit. What I actually think I disagree with Pippin. I think I more agree with Spencer. I like that there are these different WordPress experiences. I believe that the true call of open source, or the true appeal rather, is that all this creativity comes in. Look at these creative experiences we have for WordPress, for Linux, or for any other open source tool that people are using. If I'm the kind of person who needs my handheld with a dedicated host and full-time support and high availability servers, I can get that. If I like to do it DIY it myself, I'm going to do that also. If I want to hire Stephanie to help me keep my site updated, I can do that, or I can do it myself. That creativity, that flexibility, I think is what's kind of made us, WordPress 40% or 45% of the market.
So, Stephanie, I understand what Vic's just said, but in my heart, I just don't think Liquid Web and some of the hosting providers are going to be able to resist the temptation of trying to build in what I call an enclosed garden. They're just not going to be able to resist it. What do you reckon, Stephanie?
I don't know. I always feel like kind of like a little kid sitting at the grown-up table talking about things like acquisitions and stuff like that because I don't know a lot about it. This isn't where my area of expertise really is, but I know enough from the consumer side of things to think that why does a hosting company, and this is a bit of a naive angle, but still it's from the outside looking in, right? Why does a hosting company keep buying up all of these things? I mean, the only thing I can think of because is that similar to what you're saying, John, is that they are going to want to start, because it seems like random things that they're.
Well, it comes to liquid web, there doesn't seem to be, apart from buying market share or eyeballs, Chris can spin it as much, use his enormous powers of communication and spin as much as he likes. But there doesn't, apart from buying eyeballs, there doesn't seem to be any strategy in liquid web's buying frenzy at
but
all.
I don't know enough to say that, like, oh, they for sure have this or that going on. I don't know. I don't know anything about that. What I do know is I do like Chris Lemma. I think he's a good guy, and I think he does care about people. I've been on the receiving end of his kindness and generosity. I like that guy. I like me some Chris Badgett too. Like these two Chris's in the LMS space. Like I think, I mean, think about the lovely comments that this Chris just said earlier. He's got a competitor coming in, buying all this stuff, and his first things where he's so happy for them. Like, this dude is awesome. He's the
Chris
dude,
is a friend of mine, but he's not
him.
that lovely. The reason why he said that is true. The biggest competition is not internal; it's the external sasses like Kajabi. My own business. We're in a, I'm only a very small company, but they pay adverts to show up in front of when you put WP-Tonic in. They are gunning for me, and I'm gunning for them in my little way. But there we go, John.
But the other thing, hold on, the other thing though that I want to say is that I think this is like a little tiny nugget of it. But what I see when I read this stuff is that, like, how awesome is it to be a part of this industry that actually has been thriving through COVID? Like so many industries on this planet have gone under, have been really struggling, have had so many the past 2 years have been terrible. And our big problem now is trying to figure out which companies to buy up because we've got so much extra capital. Like, there's something to be said for being a part of that. And then to take it farther, we could say, how are we using our capital, whether it's money to buy up companies or the fact that we're still solvent and that we can help people, like, how are we using whatever capital it is that we've gained through all this to then make a difference in the industry and for our customers too? That's how I look at it.
Don't get me wrong, Stephanie. I have the greatest respect for Chris Lemma. Unlike some people in the WordPress community that won't come on my show and won't answer my email, he's totally willing to come on this show, and he answers my email. I'm not a personal friend like Chris here or some of the other panel members, but he's always treated me with respect, unlike some other people in the WordPress community, Stephanie, who only want to go on shows when they're asked easy questions and they're bum licked constantly. Try
to not ever use that expression.
Right, sorry. John Locke. I think we need to go for our break, listeners and viewers, and then we'll come back. We'll get John Locke's opinion on this, and then we'll move on to the Pippin story. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. I've put a terrible vision in Stephanie's mind. I apologise, Stephanie. It won't happen again. Sorry about that. John, so what's your take on what I've said and what the panel said?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple things going on in WordPress, the market. and specifically with the hosting companies, because they seem to have the bulk of the buying power. They have the most buying power. The hosting companies, there's really two things that you can do, and that's grow to basically become like a large part of the market, or exit to one of the major players like EIG or whatever they're calling themselves now, or a GoDaddy. And a couple of years ago, it seemed like Liquid Web, or at least I was hearing rumblings of this, that they were trying to get acquired. But it seems like right now, that they might have just said, we're going to try and build this as big as we can by acquiring these different things. The second thing that I see that's going on is something that Christy Chirinos was saying the other day on Twitter, and that is there's a consolidation phase happening in the WordPress market. We often talk about WordPress maturing, but basically what's happening is like all the smaller companies are exiting to these larger companies, and there's a consolidation happening, such as what happens in a lot of markets, where it starts with a lot of players competing for market share, but now a lot of those are like exiting and being consolidated into these hosting companies. Now, I don't know necessarily how I feel about this consolidated, the hosting companies having so much power within WordPress, the community, because that's really like what I see happening is they're the only type of company that seems to be acquiring.
Well, I see where you're coming from, John, but the Pippin story, there's some aspects of the Pippin story that sanded me. But there's some aspect. One of the good points is that they got bought out by a non-hosting company.
Well, I have thoughts on that too, and we'll get to that. But yeah, that's I mean, really what I see is going on. It's an extreme consolidation that's like happening in this last year, and I don't know if it was exacerbated or sped up by COVID, or just people are, they just get to the point where it's like they're ready to exit and do something else.
I think the other factor, which is good news, is that outside VCs like Rob Rowling, him and his wife have become friends of mine, and through Tiny Seed, they have decided that they are going to be entering the WordPress space a lot more. I think that Rob and his wife are just two of the most quality people, and become friends of mine that have entered my life for quite a while, John. And I think it's great news that that outside venture capital is now really looking at WordPress more seriously. Now let's move on to the Pippin Williams. It's been quite a while since I've interviewed Pippin. I interviewed him about 3 times. He's one of the most quality individuals in the WordPress space. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Pippin, which is rare in the WordPress community. Normally, you've upset somebody and they hold it against you forever. But I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Pippin, and he's always been nice to me, professional, business-like. So, Chris, what was your response when you heard that? I was delighted for Pippin, but also saddened that for a period of time he's divorcing himself from the WordPress community, because I thought he was one of the greatest members of the community, really, Chris.
He is a pillar of the community, and I was having a conversation with some other WordPress entrepreneurs the other day about this, where it's only human that when a respected member of the tribe leaves, it's painful for the people left behind. And that's just a sign of what an upstanding guy Pippin is. And that just is what that is. But it's also been a long time. It's been 10 years. And I think on this panel or people listening or watching, sometimes you make a major change in life. I used to run sled dogs in Alaska. I didn't even have an internet connection, and now I'm a software entrepreneur. That's a major change, and people go through these kinds of changes, and that's okay. I was listening to an interview with Pippin between him and Corey Miller, and the big thing that jumped out, there are a couple things that really stood out to me about this story. Number one is that he was talking about the early days of kind of getting involved with WordPress and how he just kind of followed his advice to the next generation of, WordPress entrepreneurs is to be really focused and have a vision and a mission. Like he says, and that he was kind of unfocused and he just kind of kept reacting to what was happening. And then I think over time he ended up with a couple of great products like Affiliate WP and Easy Digital Downloads. But he didn't have like a clear vision or strategy. He was young in the industry. He was smart. He was very skilled, very productive, good at building a team. But that's harder to do when an industry gets more mature and bigger, to just kind of come in and see what happens. So I found that interesting. And the big takeaway for me was that, and you could kind of see it, I think, if you look in the rearview mirror, that he said he kind of lost passion. He started this brewery.
Well, I'm English. I've never had passion.
He started a brewery like 4 years ago or something, which I know from just in my experience as an entrepreneur, as soon as I see and hang out with a lot of entrepreneurs, as soon as I see side projects, that's often like an indication that progress is going to slow, focus is going to scatter, productivity is going to go down. He had already built a great team and some great products within the Sandhills brand. So he was able to ride both horses, but that's not always, I think that was probably earlier in his kind of passion shifts. So you have to be super passionate. I go to bed thinking about learning and education, entrepreneurship.
Do you?
It fires me up.
I don't, Chris. I just go to bed. Right.
It fires me up. I'm obsessed. And if I were to ever lose that or not be passionate about it, I could see that.
It's
like
quite fascinating, actually. My Englishness is taken by some people as lack of commitment. Those that really know me, like John, is that I'm extremely focused and I don't give up, which is a good point and sometimes is a bad part of me. But I am an extremely determined individual. But my Englishness, my seemingly lack of passion, kind of confuses, especially Americans, where they seem to require that you're loud about your commitment.
Being passionate doesn't necessarily mean you're loud about it, but at the end of the day, Pippin was always really transparent around his numbers. I think last year Sandhills did $4 million or something like that. And I mean, he built a great company, and he's just doing a new chapter. And
he had some great, JJ, who hasn't come on the show recently, but I'm sure he will come back. He's just he had some fantastic employees, didn't he? John, I think his interview on the Matt report, Matt Medays is coming on the show in the next couple of weeks, a great supporter of the show. I thought he had a great interview with Matt, and it became obvious. There was two things that I got from that interview, John, is that Pippin kind of thought he just didn't have the marketing chops or the drive to move the company forward. And what people don't realize, if you're not going forward in business, you're really going backwards. So if you can't push your business forward, it's time to sell it because it's going to slowly die otherwise. And I think he realized that. And secondly, the company that's bought it, I have very mixed feelings about them. But in some ways, I was delighted that it wasn't a hosting company. What's your thoughts, John?
Okay, so I read his initial article that he put on the Sandhills blog. I watched the Matt Report interview. I watched the Post Status interview. It won't make sense to a lot of people. And like Chris mentioned previously, there is a sadness when someone who is this well respected, and like yourself, I have never heard anyone say anything bad about Pippin ever. Never. And that's like one of the only people. Maybe the only person.
It's very rare in the WordPress community. There's plenty of people in this community that hates my guts, but there we go.
Who cares?
Who cares? They're fuckers anyway. All right, there you go. All right.
But the one of the reasons too that he stated in his blog, and it made a lot of sense, is him and his dad and his grandpa, I guess they go out and they do this thing where they chop firewood each weekend. And his grandpa was getting older. And I think that one day he just woke up and realized like he wants to spend time with his dad, while, he's still...
I thought it was interesting. He said he had this 3-month break where he just left the company and had no... And he said after the 3 months, he would either have that feeling, I want to drive this company forward, or he'll feel, I've had enough of it. And when he came back, he still had the feeling, I've had enough of it, didn't he?
Well, and here's the thing too. For him and his partners, he made the right decision because he has like a few partners in this company. But for him personally, it sounded like he just wanted to focus on other things, like doing the brewery with his brother. And I can totally respect that. I think there's a lot of people that are there. And in fact, I know that there are like a lot of people that are feeling trepidation around Pippin leaving Sandhills and selling it to Awesome Motive. But it's him and his partner's company to do with as they see fit.
Well, I see Sayer as the kind of Gary Vaynerchuk of WordPress in some ways. He's got that kind of hustler, in-your-face style, isn't he? Like Gary, it's all guns blowing, isn't it? Which is totally different in business style to Pippin Williams. They're both good business styles, but they're very different CEOs and personality types, aren't they?
But it sounds like this deal had been kind of like they had been kind of talking about it for like a while. So, but at least the good thing is there are a lot of good people that work for Sandhills. There are a lot of great people that I respect that work there, and at least they're going to go somewhere where they're not going to get laid off later. They're going somewhere where there's resources to put into these products to grow, which I think was another concern. And I think that these products will continue to be stable and grow, which I think is very important. And
they're going to get a lot more expensive though, aren't they?
And the people who knows, maybe.
Well,
but
based on the track record of the new owner, they're going to get a lot more expensive very quickly.
Hey, they've got an awesome motive.
Yeah.
Some of that name.
Oh, Jesus.
The drones are coming on Facebook right now.
Oh, that's painful. Vic, what do you think? Was Pippin Williamson on your radar at all then, really?
100%. So we integrated their licensing technology over at Watchful, and that lets our customers, for example, apply a bunch of premium updates to their software from a central dashboard, as opposed to, say, putting their license codes directly on the website. So if you have 1,000 websites, that's a big deal, especially if you change your license, for example. And so I worked with him and a couple of their staff, and we rolled that out last year. So I don't know Pippin directly. We had a couple of short emails. I mostly worked with some of his partners and staff. But what was interesting was I reached out to Syed at Awesome Motive, who I don't know, but I just wanted to introduce myself. I cold emailed him on his website and said, hey, we've done this integration with EDD. We'd love to do more of it. And I didn't realize that Awesome Motive were such a big user of EDD licensed software. So as an opportunity, I thought if we could get more of those softwares.
Did he answer your email?
Within 48 hours. And here's the interesting point.
He doesn't answer my email. He doesn't.
I can be your proxy, Jonathan. But here's the interesting point.
He's made it perfectly clear that he's never coming on my podcast. So there we go.
He said that they had dropped license codes in Opt-in Monster altogether, still doing the licensing, but dropped the license code. I don't understand how that technology works, but it might be a shift in for the EDD people. Even if the pricing remains where it is, there might be a different approach to the technology if that email is an indication. So looking to simplify license codes in general, which probably is a good thing for the end users at least.
That's great. So Spencer, what did you think of this?
I'm not sad as much as happy for Pippin because his story over the last couple of years, he's explained how he had personal burnout and obviously some very good valid reasons because he's built something financially lucrative to take advantage of it before it's too late to get the benefits in the way he could today, right? I mean, his father's age and his wanting to spend time. I don't know if he has kids, but just burning the candle really hard for a decade.
Yeah.
I am a nostalgic person, but I also am tempering my nostalgia for the days when Pippin, amongst other people I refer to often, are one of the developers who taught me how to develop. He didn't know that, but I knew that because I would just look at everything he wrote and he was so very clear and helpful and so on and so forth. So from that standpoint, my enthusiasm for where WordPress is going is exciting because it feels like, as I've mentioned in today's show, we're in this unusual situation where all of us, whoever's involved in any way today, have staked out a little ground in something that is only going to get more and more valuable, more and more business-like. So there's kind of like the real estate market, which I was involved in from the beginning. There's like, wow, I didn't realize this is happening. Oh my God, this is happening. We're here. We're now. This is it. Like, strap on your seatbelt because this is going to be a wild ride for the next couple of years. Anyway, it doesn't, to me, seem to be anything other than perfectly logical for him to take what is probably life-changing money and be done with it. And the rest of it is going to be what it's going to be. But clearly, of all of the verticals, Saeed's team, I think he said they have 200 people, is one of the most agile and strategic. And he also controls a channel, like not like the story, the Bezos thing, but in the same way that Bezos was long-term strategic, I see Syed as being very long-term strategic, and he's
I think you're so touch. I think you're so right there, and it's so different to Liquid Web. I feel.
You don't know what's happening in Liquid Web, and I got some insight that I'll let Chris share directly. But the difference between Syed and Liquid Web is Syed's been here since the beginning, and I didn't realize this. He had that YouTube channel, List 25, that I'm sure he sold for 7 figures plus. He seems to have this Midas touch that anything he's involved with goes. So I would put a significant bet on what they are doing there as being one of the, if not the leading consolidator.
I think also the other interesting thing, Spencer, they're the few companies that have managed to build a plugin in the WordPress ecosystem and then move it totally to the SaaS model. Opt-in
the SaaS model, I think, is what you were referring to a moment ago, Vic, perhaps, is that the SaaS thing sort of blew up in their face a little bit, if you ask my opinion. Because, for example, with WP Forms, which I think was where they had some changes, people were like, why am I running the plugin and then I'm running it on your server? That seemed to me to be very odd. And I don't know if they've changed that, but I do feel that they're agile enough and he understands the psychology enough. That's the key of mindset. I can use a comparative, although I think, didn't they acquire Yoast? I'm not sure if I'm mixing it up, but like Yoast.
No, it was the other people. Similar name though.
But the point I'm making is when we think of how sensitive a major brand is to the customers, I felt like Yoast's brand was a little insensitive to how the things they were doing affected users. Whereas Syed seems to be with the products they've acquired, he seems very sensitive to what the end result is for the consumer. And we've seen in several of the products that they've acquired that they've actually further refined it, further tailored it, further improved the pricing model. And I think that that's the concern that anybody doing consolidation should have, because look at Netflix, look at Disney, look at Hulu, all those TV channels sort of things. They're racing to the bottom. The only way they win is by loyalty of the customer. And I think that's going to be one of the determining factors in the future about which of these columns is the one that somebody chooses, is what kind of experience, what kind of relationship am I going to get? Because the plugins and the software are not enough to hold anybody anymore.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Stephanie, I want to go into the recommendations because I want to keep this to the hour. So I'm going to go... please forgive me, Stephanie. All right, thank you. You're one of the few people that I have. Let's go into our recommendations, and hopefully the Slack channel. Can you keep an eye on this, Uncle Spencer? Can you make sure that they can put stuff in the Slack channel? So let's start with. Well, or put them into chat, and I'll make sure I will copy them somewhere. So let's start with Chris. Chris, got a recommendation or something you want to share with the tribe?
Yeah, I've recently been building out some use case demos for Lifter LMS. We haven't launched them yet, but people use it in different ways, like for course expert sites, like courses, membership sites. They use it for like internal company training portals, and they use it for school applications. Same tool, different use cases, building different demos, building all that stuff out. I've really been enjoying. It's a simple free plugin, but it's called user switching. So if you need to like switch around your site and see what the experience is from a specific user or a specific type of user, I just find that plugin invaluable. So that's for a more advanced, like user-driven site. I couldn't imagine not having that on the site.
When are you buying it, Chris?
I don't know if that would be a top on the acquisition list, but
right, there we go. I just thought
the free plugin is great.
Yeah, but I just thought you'd probably be on your buying list.
That plugin's invaluable, by the way, for anybody running a membership site.
Yeah, that's why I thought you might be buying it.
Are you using user switching or WP user switch?
Let me find it real quick. I believe it's user switching, but I'm just going to double check.
Put it into the chat, Chris, and Uncle Spencer is helping me out. Very good.
I've been using user switching. Is the other one? Do you like the other one better?
No, I think the one you're using is the one I'm using. That's what I posted. User switching. Yeah.
Right. Stephanie, have you got a representation for the
I use
tribe?
that as well on my site. Yeah. I was thinking about putting my name behind SetApp this week. It's a Mac. It's Mac only, but it is a collection of tools. You pay a subscription, and it has a ton of premium and freebies in there, but you can just install them all through that. And it's like $10 a month or something. And at first I was like, that's crazy. And now I got a new computer 2 weeks ago, and it was like the second or third thing after that I put on.
It's the AppSumo of the Mac, isn't it?
Well, I still love me some AppSumo as well, but it's you don't pay for them additionally. But the things that I'm now obsessed with using in there would cost me more than $10 a month.
You're obsessed,
what is the URL, Stephanie?
Yes, put it into chat. Put it into
it's
chat.
SETAPP. I'll find the URL.
Yes, put it into chat, Stephanie, and Uncle Spencer will put it in the Slack channel.
Okay.
Vic, have you got a recommendation you want to share with the tribe, Vic?
Yeah, sure. A quick one to follow up almost on what Stephanie said for Mac. Cloud App, Screen Capture. It's actually owned by Automotive, which I didn't realize until I was reading all this acquisition news. But plugin-wise, I really like block visibility. I'll put the link in here, which allows you to conditionally control block display. So different times, different conditions. You can, for instance, maybe you have a sale. You can make that a block. When the sale's over, you can just have it automatically stop displaying, so you don't have to go in there and disable it or delete it. It's really handy.
That's great. John, have you got a recommendation for the tribe? And you're muted, John.
No, I'm muted. Okay, anyway, My recommendation is a channel that I discovered on YouTube called FD Signifier. And this guy, he analyzes Black people in the movies and entertainment, and kind of gives a breakdown and analysis of what it all means. I'm not doing it really justice by describing it here, but it's a very insightful channel. So go check it out.
Right, thanks for that. Put it into chat, and Uncle Spencer will. Uncle Spencer, have you got a recommendation for the tribe?
I'm going to line up with Vic on this one because I'm in my quest to really go crazy on Gutenberg, as you've seen my video and post output this week. So I discovered a native block inside of Gutenberg called the Gutenberg Query Loop block. And what it does, if you are wondering, is it allows you to achieve that hard to do thing of, I want to create an archive page of my posts or of my custom post types. And that was one of the linchpins of why you still needed a page builder. Let's say you wanted to make a custom post type and you wanted to have an archive page and so forth. You really needed a page builder to manage that. Well, now you can
Why has that been so hard?
Yeah, now you can do it. So essentially make a custom post type with the CPT UI plugin, and then you can essentially create a page, put this loop block in and tell it how to output the posts to DA. And then you do the same thing for your single page template, and you're kind of good to go. There are some little quirks here and there, but the bottom line is we're inching closer to what little reasons you need to go outside of Gutenberg. If you're willing to understand, like I did, that it requires retraining your muscle memory of where stuff is. And the UI still leaves a little to be desired.
You're so right, Spencer. As normal, great insights. I've always admired you for your insights. My recommendation, I was in two minds. I'm going to be talking about this in my newsletter and my rant video that accompanies. You need to sign up for the newsletter, tribe, where you see the real rawness of my remarks about certain people in the WordPress community. But my recommendation is a podcast by Sam Harris, Making Sense. To say I have mixed feelings about Sam is an understatement, but the one thing I admire about him is that he's prepared to discuss and look at subjects where others fear to go. And that's a two-edged sword. It's very similar to myself, but I've accepted the flack which I regularly receive for going where other podcasts won't go. And Sam has accepted the flack that he receives. But there are aspects about Sam where I have some real problems with him. But I think it's a fantastic podcast, and I recommend it to you, tribe. So, Stephanie, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to, Stephanie?
Yep, at my website, focuswp.co, and you can check out my Facebook group, Focus on Your Biz, and I'm on the weekly Divi Chat podcast every Tuesday evening. Yeah, just across itself. What is it? Tuesdays at 5 Eastern.
Yeah, mention that anytime, don't you? God bless those Divi people. Obviously, I hope you're a member of the WP-Tonic Mastermind Facebook group.
Me?
Yes, you.
Yeah, of course I'm in there. You got kind of muffled for a second, but yeah.
No, there's a few people that like to muffle me. So, Chris, how can people find out more about you?
You can find me at lifterlms.com. I also still like to sit around campfires.
Do you?
And I can easily be reached on Twitter at Chris Badgett. And then check out our podcast if you're creating courses online. Or
is that Chris Lemmer?
No, if you're creating courses online or membership sites, or you're a WordPress professional that serves that market, I think you'll really enjoy LMS Cast. We've been going for 7 years.
Yeah, it's
so
a great
check us out there
podcast.
as well.
And I just want to say, Chris, thank you for so much for being my friend and being supportive of my activities, Chris. You've been. Thank you so much, Chris.
I bet you bet. And I just want to highlight something. I found out about a client that Jonathan has over at WP-Tonic. There's this awesome documentary film called Fantastic Fungi, which is about the secret world of mushrooms. It's an awesome show. There's a huge mycology, which is mushroom science niche out there. They're putting on a virtual conference. Jonathan's using Lifter LMS and a bunch of other tools to power the virtual conference and premium content upsell. That is just incredible. So it's great to be with you on the journey, Jonathan. You are also a host of sorts, and I love what you're doing with your direction with your hosting.
Well, we are really managed WordPress, unlike so many that utilize that term. We actually do manage it for people. Spencer, thank you for those kind words, Chris. Spencer, how can people find out more about you and your thoughts?
Either at WPLaunchify.com if you want to discover your optimal WordPress stack, or at launchflows.com if you're looking to build sales funnels with WooCommerce.
And Vic, how can people find out more about you and your insights, Vic?
Yeah, you can visit our website at watchful.net or join our maintenance group on Facebook called Website Watchers.
And it's a great product. I'm gradually putting some of my websites on your platform, Vic, and I've been so far very impressed, Vic.
Fantastic.
Why do you sound surprised when you say that, Jonathan?
I'm surprised about everything, Stephanie. Especially people's meanness and ungenerosity. John, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
You can find me at my website, lockdownseo.com, but also check out my YouTube channel. Just search for Lockdown SEO. Just published a new video this morning. So
yeah, and John really knows his SEO, and he is ethical and keeps his word, unlike some people in the SEO community. We're going to wrap it up. We've got bonus content, folks. You want to go over to the WP-Tonic Mastermind Facebook group. You'll be able to watch it. We only touched the first story. I thought that would happen. We've got some other great stories. Some of the panel are going to stay on and discuss that. Some of them have to go off, but it's where we have even more discussion. So please join us on the WP-Tonic Mastermind group. We'll be back next week with another great panel, another great discussion, which I feel you won't hear anywhere else in the WordPress community. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
See you later.
Take care, everyone.
There we go. Those of you that need to leave, you can leave, and please stay, some of you, so we can have discuss the other stories, the other 3 stories, as quickly as possible.
See you guys. Nice to see you again, Chris.
Yeah, good to see you, Stephanie.
Nice to meet everybody.
All right, see you, Vic.
Right, so let's get on. Story 2, which I think relates to what we discussed. So what did you think of this, Spencer, story 2? Are you muted, Spencer?
Can you tell me what the title is for your number 2?
Yeah, it's Andreessen pulls
Bezos?
Yes.
Yeah. So Mark Andreessen, the billionaire, of whom I had a brush with in the early 2000s,
I know you did. Yeah.
Which led me here back in the days of...
It's funny how things work out, isn't it?
The long story short is, it'd be like the Fly talking about the time he landed on the hippo's back, because Mark Andreessen is, super heavyweight money guy and the founder of the original Netscape browser. Ironically, he was 3 or 4 years behind me at the University of Illinois. So I did once probably run into him in the computer lab while I was in law school. But had I known with my time machine what the future held, I wouldn't be on this show right now. You'd be on my private island. You would be there, I'm sure. Anyway, the point of this is that, and again, in light of what has occurred in the WordPress space and is occurring around the world, there's a shit ton of money, that's a technical term, where there is nowhere to get an investment return on it. Interest rates are at 0 and in some cases negative. all these people with money now have an opportunity. And what he has decided, apparently with his partner, because they're just making a killing in the venture space, is that rather than having a fund, they're going to build the Amazon.com of venture capital so that they can bring in-house all of the legal and the services and the technical stuff that's necessary in order to churn out investment in companies as a practice. And it's just an extended version of what the firms have been doing thus far, except they would stay out of all of that and they would give the money to the company to do it on their own. It appears now like a Hollywood movie studio. You're going to come onto the Andreessen fund lot and essentially everything will happen in-house, which is a large investment. But if you think long-term, again, using Jeff Bezos as the model, he apparently was always seeing the future where once he got his tentacles into everything, he would control it. And he couldn't have been any more right than he was. And so my experience with Marc Andreessen is don't bet against Marc Andreessen from the standpoint of like, he has enough money, enough contacts to be legendary. And this is a logical idea. So I think that's the next step. The benefit or the curse for society and humanity, and this is where I feel sometimes a little weary, is I metaphorically see us all on a life raft, an inflatable life raft. And we're all looking at each other across the raft. At some point, I hope, I don't pray, I hope, because I'm not religious, but I am spiritual, that I hope those with the capital realize they can't continue to starve or torture or torment or ignore the other people on the other side of the raft for the sake of increasing their money, because it's a finite supply of resources and energy and time and so forth. And I think the lessons of history have proven out that those that ignore the imbalances of being in that environment cause real disruptions. And I see this as either a positive thing or a negative thing. I don't see it as anywhere in between, because if they become efficient at doing this, they could invest in things that improve humanity and society.
This is the part of your personality that fascinates me, but also drives me bonkers.
Why?
Because, well, and it's fascinating for somebody that's so insightful can't see their own contradictions. Maybe you are aware of them. You constantly complain about me getting too political on this show.
That's not politics. That's just a generic.
You just touched something which, at its essence, is a political. The element of politics in that statement is.
But there's a big difference in how I approached it. Number one, there's no ad hominem attack. I did not say he's a stupid this or she's a bitch that or anything. I said those with wealth and power, which a very small minority of the total population of the planet, have to acknowledge the seesaw will only stay balanced for so long if they continue to act in a way that doesn't address the needs of the other people on their side. Number two is the contradiction of my spirituality against my capitalism is the nature of who I am. It's something I've talked about for 15 years in WordPress. I teach people how to be self-sufficient because I've suffered everything from being a multimillionaire to being bankrupt. And in between, that's the life of an entrepreneur. And I'm sensitive to the fact, like we talked about last week with what would I do if I got $5 billion from the MailChimp acquisition? I would give away $1 billion first and foremost. Why? Because I couldn't sleep at night otherwise, knowing that people thought differently of me. And I'm saying the same thing here. How much money do the billionaire trillionaires need at the expense of the rest of the planet? Couldn't we float all of those boats to the point where at least people aren't suffering and the planet isn't suffering? And that's not politics. That's just we're on a finite globe.
Oh, we have to slightly but I understand where you're coming from. So, Chris, what did you think of this article?
Just to build on what Spence is saying, I actually really like where he's heading as well. The technology by nature is deflationary. So it gets cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah.
It consolidates. The power that kind of runs it tends to consolidate, just like we're seeing in the WordPress space. So that means that in society, the techno elite there's a lot of money flowing that way. And if you look at the slice of the globe and just look at the United States, there's really 3 industries that are still made in the USA. One of them is healthcare, one of them is finance, and one of them is education. And then when you put the technology layer on top of those things, power and influence and is just concentrating, and the machines and the software is literally eating the world. That's a famous quote from Andreessen from back in the day. It's still true. Software is eating the world, and that includes taking the jobs of other people on the other side of the life wrap, whether you're a truck driver and we're looking at autonomous driving, or whether you're a banker, whatever it is, things are getting automated and productized like we've never seen before. So all that is to say is like society is going to look very different in 30 years. And that is why things like what are happening right now with a lot of quantitative easing and whatnot, and like getting money to people and stuff like that is happening because it's hard to make it out there. It's getting harder and harder to buy a home, and it's getting harder and harder to, get an education and get employed from that education. There's all this, it's like a pressure cooker right now. But just to kind of bring it back to what's going on in the systemization of venture capital, I think that's a great idea. But I also love the aggressive pressure coming from crowdfunding. I think they're gonna equity crowdfunding is awesome, because it's kind of like the David versus Goliath of the big VC firms. Is like, what if you fractionalize it in the same way Robinhood did with fractional shares and stocks, or Kickstarter did? What if the whole VC model gets fractionalized to the masses? I think that's really cool, so that you could invest. You don't have to be an accredited investor.
Well, I think the other thing that is the tiny seed model. When you traditional VC, you got to try and become this unicorn, this $1 billion plus, or what's the other term they use? Spartan. Where it's slightly, but then you got the with Rob, and there's other funds that are, there was a couple that tried to follow Tiny Seed and then they dropped out. But I do think there are more people looking at where you can still have control of your own company, but get some outside financing. Would you agree with me that there's signs that there's different models arising where you don't have to try and say I'm going to become a unicorn or something,
Yeah, I mean, there's microfinance. There's more and more microfinance options available, and also because of the deflationary pressure on technology, it's never been cheaper or easier to start a company as a bootstrapper. So there's kind of like, it's a tale of two cities. If you look at Silicon Valley, like I'm in some of these like Facebook groups as an example, and like that whole scene is so different from like the like you mentioned Rob Walling, the Tiny Seed, but also his microconf kind of crowd of bootstrappers who are just living all over the place, just figuring it out on their own. It's fascinating to me because these are two very different narratives. And yeah, there's not a right or wrong answer. They both can work, but I think it's healthy to have both options.
And Tribe, I will be running a one-day conference next October in Reno called Con WP, and it will be how to build a SaaS on WordPress. That's what the conference is going to be about. Hopefully, you will be able to drive up to Reno from the Bay and join us there. There will be more information on the Config WP website when I get it up in the next few weeks, and you'll be able to, I'll be asking for application for guest speakers at this conference.
Cool.
So, John, what do you think of this article?
Well, yeah, Mark Andreessen. There's, just venture capital at this type of scale. It's a problem.
Can I just interrupt slightly, John?
Yeah.
I'm fascinated, and I agree with both Spencer and what Chris has said. There's gobs of money, but when I drove up to Portland last week, yeah, there's gobs of money for certain people, but
people.
Up in Portland, there's a growing army of the dispossessed.
It's not just Portland.
I mean, an army. I mean,
good.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of totally dispossessed. There were young women there that were obviously on drugs, though, John, with no shoes, staggering around in a drug-induced state. I've never seen anything like it, John.
Well, I think for some people, it's like they just figure everything's hopeless, so why not? Something that I saw on my Twitter feed yesterday. So I've heard from people all over the country like that homes are being bought above their market value, but it's not by private investors, it's by people with cash. So I knew that Bain, the hedge fund, was buying up some of these, but check this out. Zillow is actually buying a ton of these houses.
Yeah. It's obvious. You want to know why? Do you want to know why? Because of COVID, the real long-term consequence of this virus is that the money invested in commercial property, if you're highly leveraged in commercial property, and I'll be interested in Spencer's because he has expert knowledge of this, you're fucked. You're truly fucked if you got most of your portfolio in commercial property in the US, because they're not going back to their offices. People are going to work remotely. They're not going back some fucking hour and a half commute and another fucking half hour back, wasting 3 hours of their fucking life every day. They're going to fuck off somewhere else.
Well, WeWork is probably going to be done at some point because of this, but like what you're saying, like with the VC, okay, so we got a guy that's got like a lot of VC money. He's like one of the original guys. He is, all these accelerators and stuff like that to make, Ubers and Lyfts, who, that is basically like they give money to other people who look like them, other white guys, and or people like the Theranos lady Elizabeth Holmes, and then they go and make platforms like Uber or whatever that basically they start out paying and then they put all this money into lobbying to basically disintegrate workers' rights completely, and people can't make a living off of doing it. You have these big companies like Zillow and like these hedge funds buying up all the homes. The cost of living has gone up so extremely just in my lifetime, mine and yours this lifetime. If I wasn't working for myself, if we in this call weren't running our own companies and we were like working for somebody else, we'd be fucked as far as trying to make it. And so when you go to places and you see people that are dispossessed and they're disillusioned and they see no hope of this situation getting better, and you see, all these lobbyists like for defense contractors and oil drillers, and you see climate change taking an effect and just devastating places all over the world, and the US is seeing it, and there's people still in denial about it. You have to say, like, capitalism is the problem. It's not the solution to any of this. It's what's causing these things to happen.
Well, we're getting. I don't want to go. I understand. So Spencer,
Yeah.
Like I say, I can't go to San Francisco anymore. I try not to go to Sacramento. I try not to go. I even try not to go to Reno. I try because the reason why, Spencer, is there's just a growing army of the dispossessed that are drugged out, and there's some of the most sorriest souls I've ever seen, especially San Francisco. But my trip to Portland, which is a lovely place, Spencer, it's just.
I mean, don't you realize? I mean, I'm sure you do because you're aware. You're not like tuned out. When the haves don't take care of the have-nots, that's what happens in an urban environment. I mean, I grew up in Chicago in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It wasn't until the 90s that Chicago became a livable place. The 70s in Chicago, look at any of the movies. I mean, look at the Blues Brothers movie. It's funny, but it's not that far from the truth. I mean, it was like hobos and homeless people and drunks. And you had the 1960s. Obviously, there was a Democratic convention that left thing a mess. The mayor was a dictator, got stuff done, but the city was not beautiful until the late 80s, early 90s, because the mayor, the son of the original Mayor Daley, was sensitive to the fact that he could not, in a Machiavellian way, run the city by only being feared. He had to be loved. And so what happened was he maintained his control through the aldermen, but he spread the love like a Tony Soprano amongst the neighborhood.
Spread the love.
Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm saying right now, globally, but particularly in the United States, get so much money in so many people's private accounts being used for their country club only events, when Seattle and Portland and San Francisco and even New York are in dire straits, needing that money to shower the ordinary people with basic services, basic accommodations. And nobody wants to do it because the politics of today are, let's get rid of those pieces of shit. Let's clean, like as if somehow they're going to jump off the raft into the water and not be there. And I'm saying the planet won't sustain that. The world of the people won't sustain that because there are more of them than ever. And unless the people in these venture corporations realize it and start investing also for the benefit of the normal people, it's going to have a bad result. We've already.
Yeah, so I just want to bring Chris in. So, Chris, I don't totally agree with John because I think WordPress and open source. I sense there have to be new constructs of capitalism. I think capitalism on the small to medium is quite positive. It's when it gets to the national or quasi international level that it breaks down. It gets very ugly. Do you think WordPress, open source, more different models of kind of capitalism are a possibility, Chris?
Yes. So it's the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And what I mean by that is what WordPress is, what open source is these are community based, these are decentralized, they give people a voice and an outlet for creativity. This is what's going on here. Like I forget the year it was, but like 100 years ago, 95% of people were entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like 2%. But what WordPress is really, and open source is like, what I mean by not evenly distributed is the early adopters of this technology, like Pippin, like all of us, we are entrepreneurial. So we grab these tools and then we create value with them. And we get to not just impact our local communities, but sell to the entire world. This is what makes this whole conversation around acquisitions different from, let's say, a Walmart or a Home Depot coming in and running out the little guys. It's different when you are not constrained by your local geography. So, when there's consolidation, it's not It's just different in this way. So what the way that it's different is that the local hardware store, the local retailer can still compete in today's world by being decentralized, entrepreneurial, community driven, and they can create value out there. So my advice to anybody listening or watching is really to see what you can control. Like you can control the controllables. This is what I mentioned earlier in the show. I'm obsessed about this thing. I believe that education and entrepreneurship is a vehicle for changing the world for the better. That's why I focus my life energy on creating tools for that. And that's something I can control, and I can empower other people. And we all have this opportunity to throw a pebble in the pond of life and send out ripples. They can be positive, they can be negative. Sometimes we make mistakes, but we can control the controllables. So open source and democratization gives you those tools, but you have to choose to use them, and you have to work to if you're community minded, you have to work to empower other people to use them, or people that may not be aware that these tools exist or that they can use them. There's ways you can help those around you as well. But that's the next phase.
Yeah, that's my own philosophy. Obviously, I want to do well for myself, but I do actually want to help other people as well. I'm not totally paranoid and self-focused. Thanks for that, Chris. Hopefully you won't, obviously one day you're going to sell your business and your partner, but don't do it too soon, will you? It's nice to work with an independent business.
I feel like I'm just getting started. I mean, yeah, I'm a marathon guy. I'm not a sprinter. And
one day you're going to sell up, but don't make it too soon.
I mean, it's fair to say that that's a definitive, because I would hope that all of us will look back on the conversation, and Chris, obviously our good friend here, we only wish the best for, but it would be very difficult to imagine a scenario as this race speeds up, as the consolidation continue. For most of our friends, and I would hope I'm in that bucket in some way or another as well, not to be taken up by it, because like we all can look to various industries and see, remember like lynda.com, I listened to her and her husband on Guy Raz's show. And, I remember lynda.com when it first came out, it was like a little funny thing. And when they get sold out, I think it was in the billions, right? And the idea is we all can look right now at this moment in time as the tipping point.
I've tried to get her on my podcast consistently, but she won't. But why should she?
But to the point of where these two worlds come together, because I do full-heartedly agree with Chris's sentiment. The world we're moving into, you can see how the AI and the automation and the robots are going to take over certain things. The only hope for any adult or teenager or child is to realize where you can fit into the world where human interaction is required, right? It could be sentimentality, it could be logic, it could be just interaction with things that robots and AI can't do, because we don't have a lot of control over what the trillionaires and the billionaires spend their money on, other than through two things: affecting one or two people around us every day on a personal level, taking responsibility for adapting ourselves to the world as it is rather than the world as we wish it was or hope it will be. We have to make it. And three is that the force of all of the masses together will always, like drops of water and turn into water that turns into an ocean that erodes the land, will always overtake that minority, no matter how atrocious they behave today. It's just that I hope for humanity that we don't have to go through that convulsion that is normally involved in making the change, that hopefully the brains who own the money today realize how it's in their own selfish best interest to float all the boats at least a little more, so we can live in a place that is survivable.
I think we'll leave it at that. We're going to, hopefully, listeners, the tribe, you can see that this type of conversation, you only hear it on the WP-Tonic show, and give us some feedback. It's most appreciated. Thank you, panel. We're going to end it now. We'll be back next week, folks. See you soon. Bye.